The morning bell rang at Westbrook High School, and students rushed through the hallways like water through a broken dam. Lockers slammed. Shoes squeaked on polished floors. Voices bounced off walls in a chaos of noise that would have driven most species in the galaxy completely insane. A girl stood at the entrance of room 204, and she did not move. Her name, according to the paperwork, was Lily Morgan. She was 17 years old. She had transferred from a school in Nevada. Her parents worked in technology. Everything about her file was perfect, complete, and entirely false. The creature wearing Lily's face was called Vex Thrill in her true language, though no human throat could make that sound correctly. She was a hunter from the Kethari Dominion, an empire that stretched across 400 star systems and had consumed dozens of civilizations. Her people did not conquer through brute force. They were smarter than that. They sent scouts first, observers, hunters who could wear the skin of their prey and walk among them, learning their weaknesses, mapping their defenses, and marking them for harvest. Earth had been on the Dominion's list for 300 years. It was classified as a Category 7 Deathworld, which meant its environment was considered extremely hostile. The gravity was too strong. The star was too bright. The atmosphere contained a corrosive gas called oxygen that slowly destroyed metal and organic tissue alike. Liquid water fell from the sky without warning. The temperature swung wildly from one extreme to another, but the Dominion's strategists believed the dominant species was weak. Their reports described humans as soft, fragile, slow, and lacking natural weapons. No claws, no venom, no armored plates, no electromagnetic senses. They were, by all accounts, one of the least impressive apex predators in the known galaxy. Vex Thrill had been chosen for this mission because she was the best. She had infiltrated 11 civilizations before this one. She had walked among beings with 4 eyes and beings with none. She had eaten meals that would kill most creatures and smiled while doing it. She had never failed. She stepped into the classroom. 23 human juveniles looked up at her. Their eyes tracked her movement with a focus that made something deep inside her feel uncomfortable. It was a primitive response, left over from a time when her ancestors were prey instead of predators. She pushed it down. Everyone. This is Lily Morgan, the teacher said. He was a heavy man with glasses and a tired face. She just transferred here. Please make her feel welcome. Vex Thrill smiled. She had practiced the expression for weeks, studying human facial movements until she could replicate them exactly. 23 muscles had to move in perfect coordination. Too little movement looked cold. Too much looked insane. She had found the balance. Hi, she said. Her voice was soft and friendly. I'm excited to be here. She walked to an empty desk and sat down. The chair was too small. The desk was too low. Everything on this planet was built for creatures who were shorter and weaker than the galactic average. Yet somehow, the furniture still felt wrong. The gravity pressed down on her borrowed body like an invisible hand, and she had to fight to keep her posture natural. A girl next to her leaned over. She had red hair and a face full of small brown spots that Vex Thrill's briefings identified as freckles. I'm Katie, the girl whispered. Where did you move from? Nevada, Vex Thrill said. Cool. Is it really hot there? Yes, very hot. She had never been to Nevada. She had landed her ship in a forest 200 kilometers north of here and walked through the night to reach this town. But she had studied the maps. She knew the facts. She could answer any question they asked. The teacher began talking about something called American history. Vex Thrill pretended to listen while her true attention swept across the room. She observed everything. The way the humans sat, the way they breathed, the way they tapped their fingers or bounced their legs with restless energy that never seemed to stop. One of them caught her attention. He sat in the back corner, near the window. He was lean and quiet, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that moved too much. He was watching her. Not obviously. Not directly, but she could feel his attention like a weight. His name, she would learn later, was Ryan Carter. She looked away and focused on the teacher. She could not afford to make mistakes. Her mission was simple. Observe, record, and transmit. The invasion fleet was waiting beyond the moon, hidden in the shadow where human telescopes could not reach. They were waiting for her signal. They were waiting for her to tell them it was safe. The class ended, and the humans erupted from their seats like they had been released from prison. They rushed toward the door, shoving and laughing and talking over each other in a wall of noise. Vex Thrill stayed seated for a moment, overwhelmed. On her homeworld, juveniles were quiet. They learned stillness and patience from birth. They did not waste energy on unnecessary movement or sound. These creatures were the opposite. They burned energy like it was infinite. They moved constantly, even when there was no reason to move. She stood and followed them into the hallway. The next few hours were a blur of strange experiences. She attended a class called Chemistry, where humans casually handled substances that could kill most galactic species. She watched them mix acids and bases with their bare hands protected by nothing but thin rubber gloves. She saw a boy accidentally spill something on his skin, and instead of screaming, he simply rinsed it off and laughed. She attended a class called Physical Education, and what she saw there made her want to send an immediate warning to the fleet. The humans ran. Not because they were being chased. Not because they were hunting. They ran in circles around a large room, pushing their bodies until their faces turned red and sweat poured from their skin. Some of them collapsed. Others vomited, and then they got back up and kept running. A teacher blew a whistle, and they started doing something called push-ups. They lowered their bodies to the ground and lifted themselves back up, over and over, until their arms shook and their muscles failed. Why? Vex Thrill thought. Why would they do this to themselves? She stood at the edge of the room, pretending to have a medical excuse that prevented her from participating. Her borrowed body could not handle this abuse. The biological shell she wore was designed for infiltration, not endurance. If she pushed it too hard, it would fail, and her true form would be exposed. She watched Ryan Carter do 50 push-ups without stopping. His arms did not shake. His breathing stayed steady. When he finished, he stood up, wiped the sweat from his face, and looked directly at her. He smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of something that had spotted prey and was deciding whether to chase it. Vex Thrill felt that ancient fear rise up again, the fear of being hunted, and for the first time since landing on this planet, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. 2 weeks passed, and Vex Thrill learned that everything the Dominion knew about humans was wrong. The reports had called them fragile. She watched a boy named Derek fall off a concrete structure and land on his arm. The bone inside broke with a sound like snapping wood. He screamed for a moment, then stopped. His friends helped him stand up. He walked to the nurse's office on his own 2 legs, holding his broken arm against his chest, and he made jokes the entire way. The reports had called them slow. She watched the track team practice after school one day, hidden behind the bleachers where no one could see her. A girl named Madison Hayes ran 400 meters in under 60 seconds. Her lungs should have burst. Her heart should have exploded. Instead, she crossed the finish line, bent over to catch her breath, and then ran the same distance again. The reports had called them weak. She watched 2 boys get into a fight in the parking lot. They hit each other with closed fists, targeting soft areas that should have caused permanent damage. Blood came out of one boy's nose. The other boy's lips split open. Neither of them stopped. They kept hitting each other until teachers pulled them apart, and even then, they tried to break free and continue. Vex Thrill sent a message to the fleet that night. She used the encrypted transmitter hidden in her skull, the one that converted her thoughts into signals that could cross the vacuum of space. These creatures are more dangerous than the reports suggested, she said. They seem to ignore pain. They push their bodies beyond safe limits as a form of recreation. I recommend a longer observation period before invasion. The response came back within hours. Continue mission. The Dominion does not fear soft prey. Identify military assets and communication networks. Provide targeting data within 30 cycles. 30 cycles. 30 Earth days. That was not enough time. She needed more information. She needed to understand what she was dealing with. The next day, she paid closer attention to the small details. She watched them eat. They consumed the flesh of other animals without hesitation. They drank a black liquid called coffee that contained a chemical stimulant strong enough to kill most galactic species. They ate plants, covered in capsaicin, a chemical weapon that activated pain receptors, and they called it spicy food, and asked for more. She watched them interact. They touched each other constantly, bumping shoulders and slapping backs and wrapping their arms around each other in something called hugs. Physical contact with other beings made most species in the galaxy deeply uncomfortable. Humans seemed to need it to survive. She watched them learn. They sat in rooms for hours, absorbing information about mathematics and science and history. They complained about it constantly. But they kept doing it. Year after year. Their juvenile period lasted almost 2 decades, and they spent most of it being trained. Trained for what? Ryan Carter continued to watch her. He sat behind her in 3 different classes now, and she could always feel his eyes on the back of her head. He never said anything. He never approached her. He just observed. It was unsettling. On her homeworld, being watched like that meant you were about to be killed. On Thursday, something happened that changed everything. Vex Thrill was walking through the hallway when she heard shouting from around the corner. She followed the sound and found a crowd of students gathered in a circle. In the center of the circle, 2 girls were fighting. One of them was Madison Hayes, the runner she had watched at track practice. The other was a larger girl, with short blonde hair, whose name Vex Thrill did not know. The blonde girl threw a punch that connected with Madison's face. The impact was solid and direct. Vex Thrill heard cartilage crack. Blood began to pour from Madison's nose, running down her chin and dripping onto her shirt. Madison did not fall. She did not retreat. She did not even pause. She smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Vex Thrill had ever seen. Madison lunged forward and tackled the blonde girl to the ground. They rolled across the floor, scratching and punching and pulling hair. The crowd around them cheered and shouted encouragement. No one tried to stop it. No one seemed scared. Teachers arrived eventually and pulled them apart. Madison stood up with blood covering the lower half of her face. Her nose was clearly broken. One of her eyes was already starting to swell shut. She was laughing. "Did you see that?" she said to her friends. "I got her good." Vex Thrill backed away from the crowd. Her hearts were beating too fast. Her borrowed body was starting to malfunction. The skin rippling slightly as her control slipped. She made it to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall. She pressed her hands against the cold metal walls and forced herself to breathe slowly. In and out. In and out. What kind of species laughed while bleeding? What kind of species treated violence as entertainment? What kind of species broke their own bodies for fun, and then got up and did it again? She thought about her homeworld. She thought about her people, the proud Kethari who had conquered so many civilizations. They were careful. They were efficient. They avoided unnecessary damage because injuries slowed them down and wasted resources. Humans did not think that way. They seemed to believe that pain was temporary, that damage could be repaired, that any injury that did not kill them outright was simply an inconvenience. They were insane. They had to be insane. That night, she sent another message to the fleet. "I have observed disturbing behavior among the human population. They display an extreme tolerance for pain and physical damage. They engage in recreational violence. They consume toxic substances for pleasure. I believe they may be psychologically unstable as a species. Recommend extreme caution." The response took longer this time. When it came, it was only 2 words. Continue mission. Vex Thrill lay on the narrow bed in the small apartment she had rented. The gravity pressed down on her like a weight, making every breath an effort. Her biological shell was starting to degrade. The energy required to maintain it was enormous, and this planet's heavy atmosphere and strong gravity were draining her faster than expected. She had 26 cycles left to complete her mission. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But every time she started to drift off, she saw Madison's bloody smile. In the darkness of her room, Vex Thrill finally admitted something she had never admitted before. She was afraid. Not of the mission. Not of failure. Not of the Dominion's punishment if she failed. She was afraid of the humans. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that the Dominion should be afraid too. The biological shell was failing. Vex Thrill could feel it every morning when she woke up. The skin fit wrong. The muscles responded too slowly. The chemical processes that kept the disguise alive were breaking down, poisoned by Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere and crushed by its relentless gravity. She had 16 cycles left. 16 days to complete her mission and return to her ship. If she stayed longer than that, the shell would die, and her true form would be exposed. Her true form was not something humans would react well to. She pushed through the pain and went to school. She had to maintain the cover. She had to keep observing. The fleet was depending on her, but her mistakes were becoming more frequent. On Monday, a student dropped a book behind her, and she spun around so fast that her neck made a cracking sound that human necks do not make. Everyone stared. She smiled and said she had been startled, and they seemed to accept the explanation. But she saw the doubt in their eyes. On Tuesday, the cafeteria served something called pizza, and she forgot to actually eat it. She sat with the food in front of her for 30 minutes, moving it around the plate, but never putting any in her mouth. Katie, the red-haired girl, asked if she was okay. "I'm not hungry," Vex Thrill said. "You're never hungry," Katie replied. "I've never seen you eat anything. Are you, like, anorexic or something?" Vex Thrill did not know what that word meant. She smiled and changed the subject. On Wednesday, she caught her reflection in a window and saw her skin ripple like water. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. She was losing control. On Thursday, Ryan Carter finally made his move. She was walking home after school, taking the long route through the park, because fewer people would see her if the shell failed completely. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that would have been beautiful if she had been capable of appreciating beauty. Ryan stepped out from behind a tree. He was alone. He wore the same clothes he had worn at school: jeans, a gray shirt, sneakers. His hands were empty. But Vex Thrill's instincts screamed at her to run. "I know what you are," he said. She stopped walking. Her hearts began to beat faster. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "Yes, you do." He took a step closer. "You're not human. You've never been human. You're something else wearing a human body, and you're here to scout us for an invasion." The words hit her like physical blows. How did he know? How could he possibly know? "That's crazy," she said. "I'm just a normal girl from Nevada." "You've never been to Nevada. You've never been anywhere on Earth before, 3 weeks ago." He took another step. "My grandfather was a Marine. He served in Korea and Vietnam. He saw things that the government told him to forget: lights in the sky, bodies that weren't human, agreements made in secret. He told me stories before he died. He told me that one day, they would come back." Vex Thrill felt her control slipping. The skin on her hands was starting to ripple. "You're imagining things," she said. "I'm going to leave now." "No," Ryan said. "You're not." He moved faster than any human should be able to move. She had studied their physical capabilities. She knew their speed limits, their strength limits, their reaction times. Ryan exceeded all of them. He closed the distance between them in less than a second and grabbed her arm. Instinct took over. Vex Thrill dropped her human disguise for just a moment, letting her true claws extend from the tips of her fingers. They were black and sharp, designed to cut through starship armor. She slashed at his face. He ducked. Then he twisted her arm in a direction it was not designed to go, and she felt the bones inside the biological shell snap like dry twigs. She screamed. The sound that came out of her throat was not human. It was high and sharp and filled with frequencies that should have been beyond human hearing. 3 more figures emerged from the shadows. One was Madison Hayes, the girl with the bloody smile. One was a large boy she recognized from gym class. One was Katie, the red-haired girl, who had pretended to be friendly. They had been hunting her. This entire time, they had been hunting her. "How?" Vex Thrill gasped. The pain was overwhelming. Her arm hung useless at her side, and the biological shell was failing rapidly. How did you know? You don't eat, Katie said. You don't sleep. You don't sweat. You don't breathe right. You sit too still. You watch everything like you're recording it. We've been trained to spot infiltrators since we were kids, Madison added. Our parents taught us. Their parents taught them. We've been waiting for you for a long time. Ryan still held her broken arm. His grip was like iron. Did you really think you could walk into a Deathworld and hunt us? He asked. Did you really think we were prey? Vex Thrill tried to fight back. She tried to summon the strength that had made her the Dominion's greatest hunter, but her body was broken. Her energy was depleted, and she was surrounded by predators who had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. They dragged her to a vehicle and threw her in the back. Someone put a bag over her head. Someone else tied her wrists together with a material that burned her skin. The vehicle started moving. She could not see where they were going. For the first time in her life, Vex Thrill understood what it felt like to be prey. The terror, the helplessness, the absolute certainty that death was coming and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She had hunted 11 civilizations. She had never failed. She had never been caught. On her 12th mission, a group of human children had captured her in less than 5 minutes. The Dominion had made a terrible mistake. They had looked at humanity and seen soft bodies and weak minds. They had seen a species without claws or venom or armor. They had not seen the truth. Humans were not prey. Humans had never been prey. Humans were predators who had simply learned to hide their teeth. And now, in the darkness of the vehicle, Vex Thrill finally understood why her homeworld's name for Earth translated to the planet of nightmares. The room was cold and empty, gray concrete walls, a single metal table, 2 chairs facing each other. A light hanging from the ceiling that flickered every few seconds. Vex Thrill sat in one of the chairs. Her wrists were bound to the armrests with bands of some kind of metal that suppressed her ability to shift forms. Her broken arm had been set and wrapped in a hard white material, but no one had given her anything for the pain. She had been here for hours, maybe days. Time moved strangely in this room, and her body was too damaged to keep accurate track. The door opened. A woman walked in. She was older than the students who had captured Vex Thrill, perhaps 40 or 50 Earth years. She had gray-streaked brown hair, pulled back from her face and eyes that were sharp and cold. She wore simple dark clothes with no markings or identification. She sat down in the other chair and placed a thin folder on the table between them. My name is Laura Bennett, she said. I work for an organization that monitors extraterrestrial activity on Earth. I've been doing this job for 22 years. I've met 3 of your kind before. You're the 4th. Vex Thrill said nothing. The other 3 made the same mistake you did, Laura continued. They thought humans were easy targets. They thought they could walk among us without being noticed. They were wrong. She opened the folder and spread out several photographs. This one was captured in 1987. This one in 1994. This one in 2008. All of them were scouts for the Kethari Dominion. All of them are dead now. The photographs showed bodies, not human bodies, true forms, twisted and broken, displayed like trophies. You killed them, Vex Thrill said. Her voice was hoarse. Yes, after they told us everything we wanted to know. Laura closed the folder. I'm going to give you a chance they didn't get. I'm going to give you a choice. What kind of choice? Laura leaned back in her chair. Before I explain, I want to show you something. I want to show you why your invasion will fail. She pulled a small device from her pocket and pressed a button. The wall behind her lit up with moving images. This is Earth, Laura said. This is what a Deathworld really means. The images showed fire. Massive walls of flame consuming forests and cities. Smoke rising so thick it blocked out the sun. This is what happened 66 million years ago, when an asteroid hit our planet, Laura said. It killed almost everything alive. The dinosaurs, the greatest predators this world had ever known, were wiped out in months. The temperature dropped, the plants died, the food chain collapsed, the images changed. Ice covered everything. Glaciers stretched from pole to pole. But life survived, Laura continued. Small creatures hiding in burrows. Tiny mammals eating insects and roots. They survived because they were tough. They survived because they refused to die. The ice melted, forests grew, animals evolved. Millions of years later, humans appeared. We were not the strongest or the fastest. We did not have claws or fangs or armor. What we had was something more dangerous. She tapped the side of her head. We could think. We could plan. We could cooperate. And we could hate. The images showed humans now. Primitive humans hunting with spears. Humans building fires. Humans crossing frozen wastelands with nothing but animal skins to keep them warm. We hunted every other predator on this planet to extinction or near extinction, Laura said. Lions. Bears. Wolves. We killed them all. Not because we needed to. Because they threatened us. And we don't tolerate threats. The images showed war. Armies clashing. Cities burning. Bombs falling from the sky. We killed each other too, Laura said. Millions of us. Hundreds of millions. We invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We built machines that could poison the air and water for generations. We came within minutes of ending our entire civilization multiple times. She paused. The images stopped on a photograph of a mushroom cloud rising over a ruined city. And yet, here we are. She said softly. Still alive. Still fighting. Still waiting for the next threat to come. Ah. Vex Thrill stared at the image. Her people had developed nuclear weapons too. Thousands of years ago, they had used them once, against a rival nation, and had been so horrified by the results that they had sworn never to use them again. Humans had used them twice. Against each other. And then they had built more. Do you understand now? Laura asked. Your Dominion thinks we're weak because we don't have natural weapons. But we don't need natural weapons. We build better ones. Your Dominion thinks we're slow because we can't run as fast as some species. But we don't need to be fast. We're persistence hunters. We chase our prey until it collapses from exhaustion. We never stop. We never give up. We follow until the end. She leaned forward. Your fleet is waiting behind the moon. We know this because we've been tracking them for months. We've been tracking extraterrestrial activity for decades. Did you really think we looked at the stars and never wondered who else was out there? Did you really think we weren't preparing? Vex Thrill's minds raced. This was impossible. Humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be unaware. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to go home, Laura said. I want you to return to your Dominion and tell them exactly what you found here. Tell them about our weapons. Tell them about our history. Tell them that we've been waiting for contact with hostile species since we first invented radio and accidentally announced our presence to the galaxy. You're letting me go? Yes, because killing you would accomplish nothing. Your fleet would simply send another scout and another until they decided we weren't worth the trouble or until they invaded. Laura smiled, and it was not a warm smile. I want them to decide we're not worth the trouble. I want them to hear your report and realize that attacking Earth would cost them more than they could possibly gain. She stood up and walked toward the door. You have a choice, she said. You can try to escape and complete your mission. If you do, we'll kill you. And the fleet will invade, and millions will die on both sides. Or you can go home and tell the truth. The choice is yours. She left the room. The door closed behind her with a heavy sound. Vex Thrill sat in the cold room and thought about everything she had seen. The students who had captured her, the wars in the images, the bodies of the scouts who had come before her. She thought about the fleet waiting behind the moon, filled with soldiers who believed they were coming to conquer a weak and primitive species. They had no idea what was waiting for them. For the first time in her life, Vex Thrill felt something like pity. Not for herself, not for the humans, for her own people. They released her at dawn. A black vehicle with no windows drove her to the edge of the forest, where she had hidden her ship. Two soldiers in unmarked uniforms sat in the front seats. They did not speak to her. They did not even look at her. The vehicle stopped on a dirt road, and one of the soldiers opened her door. "Your ship is 2 kilometers north," he said. "Straight through the trees. Don't come back." Vex Thrill stepped out. Her legs were weak. Her broken arm throbbed with every heartbeat. The biological shell she wore was barely holding together, patches of her true form showing through like cracks in old paint. She started walking. The forest was silent. No birds sang. No insects buzzed. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do. After an hour of walking, she found her ship. It was small, designed for a single pilot. A sleek oval shape covered in light-absorbing material that made it nearly invisible to human technology. It sat in a clearing surrounded by tall pine trees, exactly where she had left it 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. It felt like 3 years. She approached the ship and placed her hand on the hull. The metal recognized her biological signature and opened, revealing the dark interior. She climbed inside and collapsed into the pilot's seat. The ship hummed to life around her. Lights flickered on. Displays showed her current location, the position of the fleet, the path she would need to take to reach them, but she did not launch. Not yet. Instead, she sat in the darkness and thought about everything that had happened. She thought about the students in the classroom, burning energy like it was infinite. She thought about Madison Hayes, smiling through a mask of blood. She thought about Ryan Carter watching her with the eyes of a predator. She thought about Laura Bennett and the images on the wall. The ice ages, the mass extinctions, the wars, the nuclear fire. Humans were not what the Dominion believed them to be. They were not soft or weak or fragile. They were survivors. They had clawed their way up from nothing on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. And they had not just survived, they had thrived. They had conquered their world and then started reaching for others. They were patient. They were persistent. They never gave up. And they remembered. Vex Thrill activated the ship's communication system. The encrypted channel connected to the fleet in seconds. "This is Scout Vex Thrill," she said. "Reporting from the surface of Earth. Classification: urgent. Priority: maximum." A pause. Then a voice she recognized as Fleet Commander Kethros. "We have been expecting your report, Scout. You are behind schedule. The invasion force is prepared to launch. Give us the targeting data." Vex Thrill closed her eyes. "Commander, I recommend immediate abort of the invasion." Silence on the channel. When Kethros spoke again, his voice was cold. "Explain yourself. The intelligence reports on human civilization are wrong," Vex Thrill said. "They are not a primitive or weak species. They have been aware of extraterrestrial observation for decades. They have captured and killed multiple scouts from our dominion. They have weapons capable of destroying cities and technology capable of tracking our fleet's position. Impossible. They are Category 7 Deathworld primitives. They are Category 7 Deathworld survivors, Commander." "There is a difference." Vex Thrill gripped the armrest of her seat. "They have endured conditions that would have wiped out most civilizations. Mass extinctions, ice ages. They have fought wars against each other that killed hundreds of millions of their own kind, and they kept fighting. They do not respond to pain or fear the way other species do. They use both as fuel." She paused, trying to find the words to explain what she had witnessed. "Commander, I watched human juveniles exercise until their bodies failed, and then they got up and continued. I watched one of them take a blow that shattered bone." And she laughed. "They consume toxic substances for pleasure. They expose themselves to radiation from their own star because they like the way it changes their skin color. They are not rational, by any standard we understand." "You are afraid," Kethros said. His voice dripped with contempt. "The Dominion's greatest hunter is afraid of soft creatures with no claws." "Yes," Vex Thrill said, "I am afraid. And if you are wise, Commander, you will be afraid too." She transmitted everything. The footage from her disguise's recording implants. The files that Laura Bennett had shown her. The images of the dead scouts. The analysis of human weapons and history. Review the data, she said. Then make your decision. But know this, if you invade, they will fight. Not like other species fight. Not surrender when the battle turns against them. Not flee when the casualties mount. They will fight until every single one of them is dead, and they will make sure to take as many of us with them as possible. She thought about Ryan Carter waving at her through the window. Friendly. Threatening. Both at once. They call themselves the apex predator of their world, she said. I believe them. I recommend immediate quarantine of the Sol system. Reclassify Earth from Category 7 Deathworld to Category Null. Do not engage. Do not approach. Mark this system as forbidden and never return. She ended the transmission. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then her display showed movement. The fleet was turning. Hundreds of ships, the pride of the Kethari Dominion, were changing course. They were leaving. Vex Thrill let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her body sagged in the pilot's seat. It was over. The invasion was cancelled. Earth was safe. She guided her ship up through the atmosphere, watching the planet shrink below her. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. It was beautiful. In a terrifying way, as she passed beyond the moon, she looked back one last time. Somewhere down there, Ryan Carter was probably sitting in a classroom, pretending to be a normal student. Madison Hayes was probably running laps, pushing her body past its limits for no reason at all. Laura Bennett was probably already preparing for the next threat, the next scout, the next invasion that might someday come. They were always preparing. They were always waiting. They had been doing it for thousands of years, long before they even knew there was anything to wait for. Vex Thrill turned away from Earth and set her course for home. Behind her, the pale blue dot grew smaller and smaller until it vanished into the darkness of space. Just another point of light among billions. Just another star. But the Kethari Dominion would never forget what it truly was. A warning, a threat, a promise. The humans were out there. And one day, they would start reaching for the stars themselves. When that day came, the galaxy would finally understand what a death world really meant, and they would be afraid.